I want to call off the engagement. True Lim Tin stood in the middle of my office. Her words short and decisive. I didn't look up, the tip of my pen paused for only a second. The reason? I'm in love with someone else. The air went still. I am the CEO of the Nam Group. She is the heir to the True Group. A marriage alliance between our families was the default ending everyone in our social circle expected. And yet she chose the exact moment right after I finished signing a major agreement to say she had fallen in love with someone else. Who? Quach Diu Quang. I finished writing the last character of my signature and closed the document folder. All right, the engagement is cancelled. Go explain it to both our fathers. She froze at my reaction. Her face turned pale. Nam Dung? You really don't care at all? I looked up at her. You've already made your choice. She stared at me, her voice trembling slightly. I'm going to register my marriage today. Congratulations. She turned and walked to the door, then suddenly looked back. You won't take revenge, will you? I let out a faint laugh. Capital never takes revenge, it simply withdraws investment. 3 days later, that very night, I convened a board meeting. All 3 of the True family's core investment projects had their funding pulled. Banks began tightening their credit lines. The first time she called me, her voice was sharp. Are you crazy? That's a business decision. She was silent for a long time. What exactly do you want? I looked at the glass wall outside the window. I'm just withdrawing. She didn't know that what I was withdrawing had never been only an engagement contract. True Lim Tin had walked in wearing 18-centimeter stiletto heels. At the time, I was signing an acquisition agreement. She didn't knock. The sound of her heels striking the floor was crisp and deliberate. Each step like a reminder that she had arrived. The secretary couldn't stop her. From childhood until now, she had never needed an appointment to enter my office. My name is Nam Dung, the current CEO of the Nam Group and the only son of the Nam family. She is the heir to the True Group, the only daughter of the True family. Our 2 families have cooperated for more than 20 years. You could say we grew up together around conference tables. I finished signing the last page. My fountain pen rested on the paper, the moment I lifted it. I looked up. She stood in front of my desk. Posture straight, makeup flawless. Her red lips were pressed together as if waiting for me to speak first. I said nothing and simply handed the documents to my assistant. The reason? I asked. She hesitated slightly, as if she hadn't expected that to be my only question. I'm in love with someone else. Her voice wasn't heavy, but it was firm. The tip of my pen paused on the paper for an instant. Just an instant. I closed the document case, placed it into the signing box beside me, and looked at her. Fine, the engagement is cancelled. Tell your father and mine yourself. The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. A crack appeared in the rigid expression she had been holding. Perhaps she had prepared many lines in advance. She might have imagined I would ask who it was, how long it had been going on, whether she had considered the business ties between our families. Perhaps she had even prepared for a scene where I would lose my temper. But I didn't. I even stood up and opened the door for her. Anything else? I asked. She stared at me for several seconds. There was resentment in her eyes. And confusion too. Nam Dung, don't you care at all? I looked at her. An engagement concerns both sides. You've already decided. I respect that. Her breathing became noticeably quicker. Is it because you stopped liking me a long time ago? She spoke that sentence very softly. I didn't answer. Words like liking or not liking had never held any real value in families like ours. The year we got engaged. She was 20 and I was 22. The engagement banquet had 50 tables. Financial media competed to report on it, calling it a union between 2 powerful families. Everyone believed we would eventually marry. Even I had taken that path for granted. She had been spoiled since childhood. The head of the True family had only one daughter. So everything went her way. She was used to people revolving around her. Used to standing at the center. Used to others calculating the consequences on her behalf. But I was different. Since taking over the company at 24, every dollar of capital had to be calculated by me personally. Every contract had to be negotiated by me. The Nam family gave me the position, but they never made decisions for me. So when she said she loved someone else, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was evaluating the impact, the risk, the cost. She stood at the door without moving. His name is Quach Diu Quang. She suddenly added. I nodded. Got it. Her expression changed. Aren't you going to ask what kind of person he is? If he's the one you chose, you must know him well. When I said that, my tone remained calm. She suddenly laughed. A little cold. You're always like this. So rational it makes people hate you. Thank you. She looked at me for a moment, as if trying to find a crack in my face. Unfortunately for her, there wasn't one. Since childhood I had known that emotions were the cheapest thing in the world. Especially at the negotiation table. She turned and left. The sound of her heels was heavier than when she had arrived. When the door closed, I stood still for a few seconds before sitting down again. The glass wall opposite reflected my face, so calm it felt almost unfamiliar. Assistant Xiao Chen knocked and entered carefully. President Nam. About Miss True. Notify legal to prepare a public statement canceling the engagement. The wording should remain objective. Yes. He hesitated before asking again. What about the cooperative projects? I looked at the files on the desk. The capital for the True Group's 3 core projects currently came from Nam Group Investments. If the engagement is cancelled, the cooperation will inevitably need reassessment. For now, don't touch anything. Understood. After the assistant left, the office returned to silence. My phone vibrated. A message from True Lianxing appeared. Are you really that relieved? I glanced at it and didn't reply. At 8 that evening, I was still in the conference room discussing a new project with the investment department. When the meeting ended, my phone showed an update on social media. It was her. In the photo, she leaned against a man's chest. The man wore a dark suit. His eyebrows were sharp, his smile arrogant. I had met him once at a business banquet. At the time he was only a newly successful entrepreneur. The company under his name wasn't large. But he spoke smoothly and had a talent for seizing opportunities. The caption had only one sentence. At last, we don't have to hide anymore. The comments section was lively, some offering congratulations, some cheering them on, some asking about me. I tapped the photo to enlarge it. She was smiling sweetly, even sweeter than when she attended events with me. I pressed the like button and exited. My assistant happened to bring documents in at that moment. When he saw my phone screen, his expression changed. President Nam. Give me the file. He handed it over, clearly wanting to say something but holding back. I flipped through 2 pages, signed them, and said, from now on, Miss True's personal updates don't need to be reported to me. Yes. The office lights went out one by one. Night fell outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It wasn't that I had never considered the possibility that she might leave. I just hadn't expected her to choose this method. But if she had chosen that path, I should make my own choice as well. The end of a relationship concerns 2 people. Cooperation concerns 2 companies. I wouldn't gamble the future of the entire group for a relationship. Nor would I change my own pace because of her decision. I picked up my phone and sent my father a message. The engagement is cancelled. We'll discuss details tomorrow. His reply came quickly. Okay. No blame, no emotion. That was the Nam family's way. Early the next morning, financial chat groups were already discussing True Lianxing and Quach Duquang. Public opinion shifted quickly. Some speculated that relations between the Nam and True families had cracked. Others guessed the cooperation projects would change. I closed the chat window and drove to the company. The sunlight outside the car window was bright. Suddenly I realized something. Since the day we got engaged, everyone had assumed we would reach the end together. Only she had gotten off the car halfway. Maybe that was for the best. At least before marriage, I wouldn't have to deal with even more complicated relationships or divide any assets. Everything was still under control. When the elevator doors opened, I had already returned to my working state, calm, clear-headed, focused. The secretary handed me today's schedule. I took it and glanced at it. Arrange a board meeting at 3 in the afternoon. He froze. So soon? Yes, some things shouldn't be delayed. If she had made her relationship public, then I should make my stance public as well. I walked into the office and sat down. The desk was spotless, documents neatly organized, the glass wall outside reflected the entire city. I looked at the mirror-like skyline. It wouldn't change direction because someone left. Capital was the same, feelings could end, but cooperation had to be recalculated from the beginning. My phone vibrated again. A message from True Lianxing appeared. What exactly were you liking? I looked at the words for a few seconds and replied with 2 words. Best wishes. After sending it, I switched my phone to silent mode. The conference documents had already been laid out. I opened the first page. From this moment on, I was no longer her fiancé. I was the head of the NOM group, and she was merely the heir of a partner company. Whether she loved someone or not, whether it was worth it or not, that was her choice. I had my own path. 3 days later, I heard the news right in the conference room. She didn't tell me herself. It came up when the legal department submitted a file regarding a change. Someone casually mentioned that the True family had completed a marriage registration today. Quach Diu Quang had become the primary related party. The hand that was turning my page paused for 1 second. Understood, I said. Continue the meeting. 10:30 a.m. My phone rang. The screen showed, Uncle True. I answered. The other end remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. Nam Dung, it's me. I'm sorry. His voice was low and hoarse. I stood up and walked to the window. That was her decision. She's been too willful. He suppressed his anger. Today she went to register the marriage directly. The family wasn't even consulted. I didn't respond. He continued, the cooperation between our 2 families won't be affected, right? At last, the real point. Cooperation is cooperation. An engagement is an engagement. I said calmly. However, I will have to reassess the projects. There were 2 seconds of silence on the line. What do you mean? The capital allocation needs to be rearranged. Nam Dung, don't be impulsive. I don't work impulsively. I ended the call, returned to the meeting table, and called in the head of the investment department. Bring me all the documents related to the 3 core investment projects involving the True family. He was stunned. President Nam, why the sudden review? We have a board meeting tonight. The atmosphere in the conference room had clearly changed. Li Sha, the director of the investment department, had followed me for many years. He knew exactly when I was truly making a move. He asked quietly, is this because of Miss True? It's about capital efficiency. I didn't explain further. 3 p.m. The board meeting began on time. More than a dozen shareholders took their seats. The former chairman of the Nam family, my father, sat beside the presiding seat. He didn't speak. He only watched me. I turned on the projector. Project 1. The True Family Commercial Complex. Capital occupied, 4 billion. Payback cycle extended by 6 months. Project 2. New Energy Cooperation. Capital occupied, 2.5 billion. Current returns below expectations. Project 3. Real estate acquisition. Risk rating increased. I paused. Comprehensive evaluation. Recommendation to withdraw core investment. Someone in the meeting room frowned. If we pull out now, outsiders will interpret it as revenge. How they interpret it is their business. I looked at the shareholder who had spoken. Capital return rates are ours. Li Sha added, if we withdraw, our cash flow will improve significantly. An older shareholder sighed. The Nam and True families have had a long relationship. Isn't this a bit rushed? I flipped to the last page. Capital never talks about feelings. When those words fell, the meeting room went completely silent. My father finally spoke. Let's vote. The result passed quickly with a majority. I signed the resolution on the spot. The withdrawal process officially began. After the meeting ended, my father called me aside. You understand what you're doing? Yes. He looked at me once and said nothing more. 7 p.m. True Lianxing called. I looked at the screen and answered. Nam Dung, did you hold a board meeting today? The withdrawal was my proposal. The resolution belongs to the board. She took a deep breath. Do you find this interesting? There was silence for a few seconds. Are you doing this because of me? The True Group's profit figures are in the reports. You can review them yourself. Her voice began to tremble. You know perfectly well I just got married. And the company is still in a transition period. If you withdraw now, how do you think outsiders will look at me? I'm only responsible for the Nam Group. When those words ended, the other side went completely silent. After a long moment she said quietly, you've changed. Less than an hour after the call ended, Quach Diu Quang took the initiative to request a meeting. We met at a private club in the city center. I arrived on time. In person, he looked even sharper than in the photos. His eyes carried a trace of provocation. President Nam moves fast, he said first. My work efficiency has always been good. He let out a faint laugh. You're doing this because you're unwilling to accept it, right? I lifted my teacup. You're overthinking it. The True family's capital just got pulled. The market will start questioning her judgment, he said, his tone full of thorns. What you're doing is putting her in a difficult position. I looked at him. I'm withdrawing investment because the returns failed to meet expectations. You're really that fair and objective? If not, then what? He leaned back in his chair. People like you love pretending to be calm. People like us? I looked at him calmly. Act like nothing's wrong on the surface. But behind the scenes you're constantly scheming. I set the teacup down. If you believe there's a problem with the capital, you can replace it yourself. His expression shifted slightly. The True family's 3 projects were enormous in scale. They weren't something his current company could easily absorb. I will replace it, he said. Then I wish you success. I stood up. He stood as well. You don't want to know why she chose me? It's not important. He stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly gave a cold laugh. Someone like you lives calculating everything. I didn't reply. When I walked out of the club, the night wind was cold. The moment the car door closed, Li Sha called. President Nam, the withdrawal news has reached the True family. Banks have already started reassessing their credit line. Follow the procedure. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. It wasn't revenge, it was simply ending support. In recent years, the True family had expanded too quickly. Many of their projects relied on our capital to sustain them. Now that the support had been removed, the pressure would naturally reveal itself. The next morning, the True Group's stock fluctuated noticeably. The investment department reported it to me. The market has started probing. Continue monitoring. At noon, Uncle True called again. Nam Dong, are you trying to force the True family? I'm not targeting anyone. The moment you withdrew capital, the banks became nervous. Even the manufacturing contractors are hesitating. The risk always existed. He fell silent for a long time. Do you really have no feelings left for Lin Tin at all? I paused for a second. Feelings are not the same thing as capital. A long sigh came through the phone. Today at the board meeting she was questioned until she couldn't answer. That's her responsibility. After hanging up, I returned to the meeting room. The team had already prepared a new investment direction. I pointed at the screen. Redirect this portion of capital to the Technology Park project. Isn't the timing too rushed? Launch the project today. Li Sha looked at me, then nodded. 4 p.m. News arrived. Quach Diu Quang publicly stated that Nam Group's withdrawal was an emotional decision. I saw the report forwarded to me but didn't respond. Li Sha asked, do we need to clarify? No. But the market will keep speculating. Speculation doesn't change cash flow. Push the project forward as planned. In the office, the phone kept ringing. Partners called to inquire about the situation. I gave a unified response. Nam Group is adjusting its investment structure based on commercial evaluation. 9 p.m. Lin Tin appeared downstairs at my company. She hadn't made an appointment. Security called to confirm. I allowed her up. When she entered my office, she was wearing a simple business suit. There was not the slightest sign of a newlywed glow. Are you satisfied now? She asked. Satisfied about what? All day the True family has been explaining our capital issues. What needs explaining are the numbers. She stared at me. You know perfectly well the banks will tighten credit. Risk assessment is the bank's responsibility, not mine to teach. Her breathing became rapid. You just want to make things difficult for me. If you think this is difficult, then the project itself has problems. She froze. Nam Dong, you weren't like this before. Before, I wasn't the chairman of the board. She opened her mouth but couldn't say anything else. The air turned rigid. Then she suddenly lowered her voice. Do you really feel nothing at all? I'm already married. When that sentence fell, her face turned pale. A few seconds later, she turned and left. This time she wasn't wearing 18-centimeter heels. Her footsteps were so light they were almost silent. The door closed. I looked at the withdrawal file on the desk. The process was already halfway through. Capital was steadily being recovered. Outside the glass windows, the night was heavy with lights, the city glittered brilliantly. And over at the True family's side their lights were still on as well. The difference was that this time I was no longer the one standing behind them. By the third day of the withdrawal process, more than half of the funds had been recovered. The finance director placed a report on my desk. President Nam, the cash flow has improved significantly. Pushing the new project forward won't create any pressure. I flipped through the numbers and only nodded once. News from the other side arrived at the same time. Banks had begun reassessing the True family's credit limits. Several partners postponed previously scheduled contracts. It wasn't a rupture, it was observation. And observation itself was already a sign of which way the wind was blowing. 10 a.m. Li Shan knocked and came in. 2 suppliers from the True side are requesting early payment. What do the contract terms say? The payment period is 3 months. Then follow the contract. He nodded and left. I knew the pressure had only begun to surface. Over the past few years, the True family had expanded too quickly. Commercial complexes, new energy, and real estate acquisitions were all advancing simultaneously. On paper, the scale looked impressive. But the cash flow had always been stretched tight like a string. Before, Nam Group's capital stood beside them as support, suppressing the risk. Now that support had been removed, the cracks would naturally appear. In the afternoon, the secretary informed me that Miss True had arrived. I paused my pen. When the door opened, I looked up. Today she was wearing flat shoes. Her hair was slightly messy. Her makeup no longer as meticulous as before. The lofty air she always carried had faded considerably. She walked to the front of my desk but didn't sit down. We need to talk. Go ahead. She took a deep breath. The banks are tightening credit on our side. You know that, right? I've heard that several suppliers are requesting early payment. That's an internal matter for you. She looked at me, anger burning in her eyes though she tried to restrain it. Does it really have to be like this? I closed the folder. You made a choice. So did I. Her fingers tightened on the desk. Do you know how difficult things are for me right now? You're currently the vice president of True Group. And you're Quach Du Quang's wife. The sentence left her speechless. Don't say things so coldly. Those are simply your position and identity. She stared at me for a few seconds and suddenly sat down. Nam Dung, how many years have our 2 families cooperated? You just pull the capital and walk away. How do you think outsiders will see it? Outsiders won't fill the cash flow gap for you. Her breathing halted. I hadn't raised my voice or shown anger. I was simply stating facts. She fell silent for a while, then softened her tone. We can adjust the terms. Nam Group can get a higher profit ratio. The project risks haven't decreased. We can add more collateral. Collateral is assets, not the future. At last she had nothing left to say. I could see the anxiety in her eyes. Someone like her, who had never truly stumbled before, was facing a chain reaction for the first time. Where's Quach Du Quang? I asked. Her expression stiffened. He's negotiating financing. How are the negotiations going? She didn't answer. The answer was already written on her face. I stood up, walked around the desk, and stopped by the window. What the True family needs right now is cash flow, not emotions. She stood up, her voice suppressed very low. Are you hoping to see us run into trouble? I turned to look at her. I'm not targeting you, but that's the result. The result comes from the structure. She bit her lip. You wouldn't have treated me like this before. Before, you weren't standing on the opposite side. The moment those words came out, her eyes reddened instantly. She quickly turned her face away. You're not leaving me even a little room. The board has already passed the resolution. But you could push for another resolution. There's no reason. She was silent for a long time, her voice nearly inaudible. Nam Dung, are you really this heartless? She stood there as if waiting for a denial. But I didn't give one. The door closed softly. I sat back down and opened the next file. 8 p.m. News about the True family's board meeting reached me. Several shareholders had questioned them directly during the meeting. The capital gap was widening. Project fund recovery was delayed. Some demanded a reduction in investment scale. Others proposed introducing new strategic capital. Uncle True had slammed the table during the meeting. The conference ended without consensus. After reporting the situation, Li Sha said quietly, their internal situation is already chaotic. Keep watching the numbers. Early the next morning I saw a familiar face in the meeting room. He hadn't made an appointment. He came directly through business channels requesting a negotiation and asked for a meeting room to be arranged. When he sat down, his expression was colder than the last time. President Nam, regarding the True family, don't you think you've gone too far? Adjusting investments doesn't count as going too far. The moment you withdrew capital, the banks followed immediately. Banks look at financial reports, not facial expressions. You're making Lin Tin's position very difficult. She made her choice. You two are putting on a performance together. You're betting she can't hold on. I'm not betting. He stared at me as if trying to find a flaw on my face. We can renegotiate the cooperation model. What can you offer? He paused. Future resource integration, specifically in the new energy sector. Do you have distribution channels or contracts? He fell silent. I pushed a financial analysis report toward him. This is the current capital gap of the True family. He glanced at it, his expression darkening slightly. You investigated quickly. Public data. He closed the file. Nam Dung, aren't you a little too rational? Rationality helps people live longer. He laughed once, clearly displeased. What you're doing now will only push the True family toward other capital markets. With that he stood up. Just wait and see. I didn't stop him. Not long after he left, Li Sha came in. Internal shareholders of the True family have begun demanding that management produce a concrete solution. They'll look for new capital. Quach Diu Quang's company isn't large enough. Then we'll see what terms they can negotiate. 3 p.m. I received a call from Uncle True. His voice was clearly exhausted. Nam Dung, someone in the board meeting proposed that I step down. That's an internal resolution for your side. They say I failed to control my daughter. I didn't respond to that. There was silence for a few seconds. Do you really have no regard for our past relationship? What I value is risk control. He gave a bitter laugh. You're even more ruthless than I was back then. The market now is more ruthless than it was back then. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair. Outside the window the sunlight was sharp. Downstairs, traffic flowed endlessly. Everything was still running as usual. Toward evening, True Lin Tin appeared at my company again. This time she didn't come upstairs directly. She waited in the lobby. When I went down, I saw her sitting on the sofa, gripping her phone tightly, looking exhausted. She looked up at me. Can we talk again? The board is pressuring my father. That's the shareholders' power. You know perfectly well where the root of this lies. The root lies in the capital structure. She stared at me, her voice choking slightly. Quach Diu Quang said he can carry things for a while, but the banks won't give us time. That's their problem to solve. Suddenly she raised her voice. Can't you slow down a little? Some people in the lobby glanced over. I lowered my voice. True Lin Tin, this is a company, not your home. A few seconds later, her shoulders slumped. I never thought things would turn out like this. Every choice has its price. She looked at me. There was confusion in her eyes. And unwillingness too, if at the beginning I hadn't. There's no meaning in saying that now. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. You really won't give me even a little face? I already did. She looked up. When? The day you opened your mouth and said you wanted to break off the engagement. I turned away. I still have a meeting. She didn't follow me. The glass doors slowly closed, leaving her outside. 10 p.m. The True family convened another board meeting. This time the shareholders explicitly demanded changes to management. Uncle True lost his temper during the meeting. This marriage is what ruined everything. Those words quickly reached my ears. I put the phone down without expressing any reaction. The office was filled only with the sound of typing. Data was still updating. The situation still evolving. I neither intervened nor stepped back. After the dispute within the True board, the direction of the market became even clearer. Two banks had already reset the True family's overall credit limits. The limits were tightened, and the pace of loan disbursement slowed down. Several partners who had already negotiated to the final stage suddenly stopped before the signing step. I no longer contacted True Lin Tin. On the Nam Group's side, the new project progressed smoothly. The bidding for the technology zone land parcel was about to begin. And the capital allocation had already been completed. But I understood very clearly that things would not end like this. Quach Diu Quang would not sit and wait for death. A person like him would never accept defeat. And he would never admit that his judgment had been wrong. Li Ha placed a file on my desk. President Nam, this is Quach Diu Quang's capital trajectory over the past few years. I opened the file. Several years ago, he had relied on a political marriage to enter the core circle of a certain company. The marriage lasted 2 years. After the company's resource integration was completed, He withdrew smoothly and only then established his own company. The scale wasn't large, but the pace of his financing was extremely aggressive. Many times he used the name of partner companies to expand his reputation in the market. His style is very aggressive, I said. Li Ha shook his head slightly. Not aggressive, borrowing strength. Right now, what he was borrowing was the True family. I said nothing further. The brand and asset scale of the True family was larger than any card he had held before. And True Lin Tin was precisely that key card. That evening there was a business reception. The organizer was an industrial investment fund in the city. Several leading companies would attend. Originally, I planned to send the deputy director in my place. But in the end I changed my mind. Some words were more effective when spoken face to face. The reception took place on the rooftop of a hotel in the city center. The lights were soft. Glasses clinked quietly. As soon as I entered the venue, I saw Quach Diu Quang. He was wearing a sharply tailored suit. Several investors surrounded him. When he spoke, his tone was confident and his gestures expansive. True Lin Tin stood beside him, smiling appropriately, but she no longer carried the relaxed composure she once had. When she saw me, her gaze clearly paused. Quach Diu Quang followed her line of sight and looked over. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. A few minutes later he walked over on his own. President Nam, long time no see, though we just met 2 days ago. I raised my glass slightly. That didn't count as a formal occasion. This does. He stood across from me and lowered his voice. You've been making big moves lately. Just adjusting capital, yet the True family is under quite a bit of pressure now. The market environment has always been like this. He looked at me and suddenly asked. Aren't you extremely jealous? Several people nearby glanced over. I smiled faintly. Jealous of what? She chose me. I gently swirled the wine in my glass. I already withdrew. You've only just entered the game. The smile on his face froze. You think you withdrew cleanly? At least the accounts are clear. His gaze turned cold. The True family's problems didn't form overnight. All the more reason to clarify them. He stared at me for a few seconds, then said quietly. Just wait and see. See what? See who can take over this game. That's your mission. I didn't linger. I turned and continued speaking with another investor. While we were in the middle of the conversation, I noticed True Lin Tin standing not far away. Her expression complicated. She didn't come over. Before the reception ended, I received a message from Li Ha. 2 partner companies had temporarily postponed signing with the True family. I replied with one word. Understood. The next morning the news became clearer. Quach Diu Quang's company's financing plan had run into trouble. One capital contributor who had already committed suddenly withdrew. The reason was simple. The True family's capital chain was under tension. Risk had increased, and the effect had spread outward. Li Ha reported calmly. They originally intended to use the True family as collateral. Now the collateral is unstable. The market's reaction is normal. Quach Diu Quang's side is urgently negotiating new financing. I flipped through the documents in my hand. Will he succeed? The conditions will be very harsh. That afternoon True Lin Tin sent me a message. Do you have time to meet for a moment? I didn't reply immediately. Half an hour later she appeared downstairs at my company. This time she wasn't dressed elegantly. Just a simple white shirt. A few strands of hair were slightly messy. She walked in without greeting me. You investigated him, didn't you? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Public data. You gave his past history to investors, didn't you? No. She looked at me, her expression complicated. But they all know now. Investors investigate on their own. She fell silent. His previous marriage was a business partnership. I know, you know, now everyone knows. Her voice trembled slightly. Did you see it coming from the beginning? I look at numbers. You looked at people. People also reveal themselves through numbers. She suddenly laughed softly, the smile bitter. I used to think you were too cold. Now I realize you calculate everything. I can't calculate emotions. When those words left my mouth, both of us paused for a moment. She turned her head away. The pressure right now is enormous. She looked at me again. Aren't you worried we might turn the situation around? That's a matter of your ability. She bit her lower lip. You really don't feel anything at all? I have no right to interfere. Her eyes dimmed. So you're just going to stand there and watch me be surrounded by the market? You chose this path. Her voice trembled slightly. Do you really not hate me? Hate doesn't fix cash flow. A few seconds later she asked. If I hadn't left in the beginning, would you have treated the True family like this? No. Her face turned pale. So it really is because of me. It's because the decision-making structure changed. She suddenly fell silent. The pride that once defined her seemed to crumble piece by piece across her face. She walked to the window and looked outside. He told me he could hold the situation. Then let him hold it. She turned back toward me. For the first time there was hesitation in her eyes. Nam Dong, have you ever thought that he approached me because... She didn't finish the sentence. You're only thinking of that now? She lowered her head. The office was very quiet. After standing there for a while she spoke softly. He told me to come here because he wanted to prove he's stronger than you. Strength isn't proven by words. Then why don't you just make a move directly? I already withdrew. She looked at me as if she were hearing the weight of those words for the first time. Withdrawing meant no longer participating, no longer bearing responsibility. She stood there for a long time. His company's capital chain started tightening today too. That's normal. You're not surprised at all? Structure determines results. She smiled bitterly. You calculated it long ago. I only read financial reports. She didn't say anything more. When she reached the door, she paused slightly. He asked me to come and persuade you. What do you think now? She was silent for a long time. I don't know. It was the first time she had said those words. The door closed behind her. I looked down at the documents on my desk. Quach Diu Kwang's financing schedule had already been delayed. Several partners had begun observing from the sidelines. The market had never made room for emotions. I didn't intervene, and I didn't offer warnings. Some calculations, once made incorrectly, had to be borne by the person who made them. When Quach Diu Kwang's financing plan was delayed for the third time, the market had already shown its attitude. It wasn't an explicit refusal, but a continuous dragging out of time. The conditions grew harsher, and the valuation was lowered again and again. The atmosphere inside the True family became even more tense. Two streams of pressure hit at the same time. Doubts inside the board of directors never stopped. Li Ha brought the newest summary to me. The True family's stock price has been falling continuously. Several small shareholders have begun reducing their holdings. Who's buying? Mainly small retail investors. No clear major buyer yet. Continue monitoring. At 4 in the afternoon the secretary knocked on the door. Miss True is outside. She said she had an appointment. I looked up. When the door opened, I almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing a simple black outfit. No jewelry. Her hair was tied up neatly. And her face looked paler than the last time. The natural arrogance she once carried seemed to have been shaved away. She walked to the desk without greeting me. We can renegotiate. Her tone was direct. Negotiate what? She sat down, her fingers interlocked. The True family's commercial complex project. You can rejoin the investment. Under what conditions? How much equity do you want? She gave a number. It was indeed higher than before. I prefer this response. How large is the capital gap? She paused slightly. In the short term, 1.5 billion. The long-term figure is still being calculated. I leaned back in my chair. The risk hasn't disappeared. We can invest in phases. Collateralized assets, core assets, liquidity. I didn't press further. Personal matters can be set aside. The project can continue. When she said that sentence, it was clear she had forced the words out with too much effort. Right now, whose wife are you? The air froze instantly. Her fingers tightened. I knew you would ask that. That's the reality. She lowered her voice. Marriage doesn't represent a commercial binding. Then in what capacity did you come to see me? She didn't answer. I stood up, walked to the cabinet, took out a document, returned to the desk, and handed it to her. It was Nam Group's upcoming cooperation list. She opened the first page. The True family wasn't on it. The second page didn't include them either. She flipped to the final page. Her hand trembled slightly. You already arranged everything. Capital can't sit idle. She looked up, her voice caught slightly. You won't give us even one opportunity? There's no reasonable justification. I can withdraw from management. That's your internal matter. She stared at me, her eyes reddening. We grew up together. That was in the past. You're really this ruthless? I don't make decisions based on emotion. She suddenly laughed softly. The sound was faint. When you speak now, there's not even a trace of warmth left. Warmth doesn't fix financial statements. She closed the document. What if I get a divorce? The question came unexpectedly. I looked at her without expression. That's your choice. If I cut ties with him, would you reconsider? The project's risk won't disappear because of a divorce. At that moment she finally understood that my refusal wasn't about conditions. The structure itself had already changed. She stood up and paced slowly across the office. Quach Diu Quang said you just want to see us bow our heads. He said sooner or later you'll loosen your position. He told me to come test you. She didn't deny it. After a few seconds of silence she said quietly. He's under enormous pressure right now. And I am too. It was the first time her voice carried a sense of helplessness. In the board of directors, some people have already proposed bringing in outside capital. The terms are terrible. Then evaluate them. If we do that, our shares will be heavily diluted. That's the reality. She stepped closer to my desk. Nam Dung, I can admit that my initial judgment was wrong. I didn't respond. I thought he could bring new resources, new growth. And now? Now, I can't see through him. She lowered her head as if hiding something. I never expected you to withdraw so completely. That was a necessary step. She suddenly looked up. Have you regretted it, even a little? She froze there. The confidence she once carried, the confidence people used to chase after, collapsed entirely in that moment. She sank down into the chair. Her voice dropped. For the first time in my life, I feel like such a failure. Failure is a result, not a label. You wouldn't have spoken to me like this before. The office was filled only with the low hum of the air conditioner. A few minutes later she stood up. Then let me ask one more time. If the True family completely withdraws from management, and professional managers take over, would you consider investing again? That depends on the proposal. She nodded. I'll redo the proposal. There isn't much time. She walked to the door, then paused. Today at the board meeting, Quach Diu Quang pushed part of the decision-making onto me. You already signed. If you sign, you take responsibility. She closed her eyes. He's already starting to shift the blame. I'm not surprised. Now do you see him clearly? When the door closed, her back looked incredibly lonely. That evening, the True family's stock fell again. When the investment department reported to me, their tone was cautious. President Nam, some people are asking whether we intend to acquire them. Do not respond for now. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window. The lights from the building across the street illuminated each square of glass. I remembered the first time she wore an evening dress and stood beside me. Back then she had talked about what the True family would achieve in the future. How large their ambitions would become. She had always been ambitious. But ambition had to match judgment. My phone vibrated. A message arrived. I'll redo the proposal. I didn't reply. The cooperation list still lay spread across the desk. Every piece of capital already had somewhere to go. This was not a matter of emotions. The position itself had changed. She thought what she had lost was the engagement. But what she had truly lost was her position on the board. 3 days after True Lianxing said she would redo the proposal, the market gave its answer first. The debt situation of several companies under Quach Diu Quang's name was publicly exposed. It wasn't rumor, it was official financial reporting. Several short-term loans had already matured but remained unpaid. Interest compounded on interest. The cash flow was stretched tight as a wire. Li Ha placed the documents on my desk. It's been verified as true. I flipped through several pages. Did the True family guarantee these? Some projects involve joint liability. She signed them as vice president. Right now she was the vice president of True Group, and also the wife of Quach Diu Quang. Those two ropes were tightly tangled together. At 3 in the afternoon, True Group announced a change in personal shareholdings. True Lianxing sold part of the shares she personally held. The price wasn't high. The purpose of the funds was very clear. To cover losses. Li Ha's tone was calm. She's trying to save him. Will it work? Very difficult. Early in the evening I met two bank representatives in the reception room. They asked directly, President Nam, does Nam Group intend to participate in the True Family's debt restructuring? Not at this moment. If the True Family's capital chain breaks, it will affect confidence across the entire industry. This sector has many interconnected chains. The other party nodded and didn't pursue the question further. After seeing the bank representatives out, I had just returned to my office when the secretary knocked again. Miss True is downstairs. I was silent for a second. Let her come up. When the door opened, I almost didn't recognize her. Her face was bare of makeup. Her eyes were visibly red. She stepped inside and closed the door very gently. You've seen it, haven't you? Yes. She stood in front of the desk without sitting. The debt situation on his company's side is more serious than I expected. The financial reports are public now. The banks have already come knocking. That's standard procedure. She suddenly laughed. The sound was bitter. Did you already know things would turn out like this? I looked at the structure. Then why didn't you ever think about warning me? I did. When? The day you said you wanted to cancel the engagement. The air in the room pressed down heavily. She suddenly sat down and covered her face with both hands. A few seconds later she looked up. He's not like you. Her voice was already hoarse when she said it. When you chose him, did you think about that? Her fingers gripped the armrest tightly. I thought he was bold. Bold doesn't mean capable of carrying responsibility. She closed her eyes. Today at the board meeting someone proposed removing me from the position of vice president. The reason was a mistake in decision-making. You already signed. I didn't comfort her, nor did I mock her. If I withdraw from management now, would you step in? Her face turned pale. Why? Even if the True Family truly can't hold on anymore, the market will still offer a price. Tears suddenly fell from her eyes. Not the kind of loud, heartbreaking sobbing, just silent tears sliding down. I didn't hand her a tissue. Not because I was cold-blooded, but because I understood the boundary. She wiped her tears, her voice trembling. Today at the meeting, Quach Diu Quang said I was the one who insisted on the expansion. Did you insist? No. But you signed. She suddenly stood up. Do you think I deserve this? I'm not making a judgment. She laughed once, the sound tinged with self-mockery. I used to think I could control everything. Now even my marriage is starting to crack. What did he say? He said it's just temporary pressure. But debt doesn't listen to comforting words. Yesterday we had a huge argument in public. The media already photographed it. They photographed it? Yes. I didn't ask further details. He's starting to shift responsibility. She lowered her voice. He said the decisions were led by me. And how did you respond? Silence is also a response. I realized I understood him far too little. Seeing clearly now isn't too late. It's too late. She stood there as if she had suddenly lost her balance. My father's health isn't good. The pressure from the board is enormous. And I still have to deal with his debts. Her voice became very soft. Nam Dung, I never thought I would lose. I didn't accept that wording. This is a problem of judgment, not winning or losing. A few minutes later she sat down again. If the True Family restructures, would you participate? That depends on the terms. Control rights. I want a controlling stake. That's the only way to minimize risk. Her breathing clearly faltered for a moment. If that happens, the True Family will no longer belong to the True Family. Does it still belong to them now? She had no answer. The phone in her handbag vibrated. She glanced at it but didn't answer. Is he calling you? I asked. He says the capital chain can still be negotiated. Who will negotiate for him? He's looking for new capital. At what valuation? Very low. That's the price he has to pay. She looked at me again. If I hadn't left in the beginning, would you have helped me carry all of this? In the beginning, none of this existed. The light in her eyes dimmed. Before, I always thought you were too cold. But you always saw through everything. She stood up. I didn't come today to beg you. Then why did you come? I wanted to hear the truth. Does the True Family still have a chance? Yes. She paused, her breath catching. The premise is accepting reality. And reality means restructuring. Reducing scale. Bringing in new capital. Including Nom Group. If the terms are appropriate, I'll go persuade the board. I'll persuade them to accept dilution. That's still better than total collapse. When she said this, her tone was no longer heavy. The sharp stubbornness that once defined her was gone. In its place was clarity. She walked to the door and then stopped. Today Quach Diu Quang proposed a divorce. I looked at her. What do you think? She paused for several seconds. I'll think carefully before making a decision. The office returned to silence. Li Ha walked in. The True Family's board just announced a preliminary restructuring proposal. They plan to cut several projects and bring in outside capital. The share ratios are still being negotiated. Keep monitoring. Night fell. The lights of the building across the street remained bright. I sat in my chair without any unnecessary emotion. She had gone from stubbornness to regret, from confusion to independence. But the direction was already clear. 3 days after the True Family announced their restructuring resolution, a rare official document was sent to Nom Group. It wasn't a message from True Lin Tin. It was a formal invitation issued in the name of True Group's board of directors. The wording was cautious. The content was direct. They hoped Nom Group would participate in the restructuring as a strategic investor. The terms were open to negotiation. I placed the document on my desk and didn't respond immediately. Li Ha stood beside me. This time they're going through the official channel. Who submitted it? The head of the True Family signed it personally. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. The meeting was set at True Group's headquarters. I didn't bring many people. Only the legal director and the finance director accompanied me. The atmosphere in the conference room was much colder than before. The head of the True Family sat in the chair at the head of the table. His face was visibly worn. Several shareholders looked stern. True Lin Tin sat near the edge of the table. She was no longer the center of attention. Her seat position made it clear. The title of vice president had become little more than a name. I sat down. The documents were spread out. The head of the True Family spoke first. Nam Dung, this time it's cooperation at the corporate level. I understand. The True Family is willing to open up its equity and bring Nam Group in. For this percentage? He stated a number. It wasn't enough to form control. I looked at our finance director. He shook his head slightly. This ratio cannot carry the risk. The conference room fell silent for several seconds. One shareholder spoke up. President Nam, what conditions do you propose? Controlling stake. The 2 words made the atmosphere even more tense. The head of the True Family tapped his fingers lightly on the table. A controlling stake means the True Family loses initiative. Do you still have initiative now? Several shareholders exchanged glances. The finance director projected the risk assessment onto the screen. If Nam Group does not join True Group, their cash flow will reach the warning threshold within 3 months. The numbers were clear. They carried no emotion. One longtime shareholder asked quietly, "Can we raise capital from other sources?" I said nothing. The finance director answered for me. Other capital sources are offering even harsher conditions. The head of the True Family remained silent for a long time. Nam Dung, do you really want to take it this far? This is a commercial negotiation. He looked at me, his gaze complicated. You and Lin Tin grew up together. What we are discussing now is the company. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Give us some time. All right. The meeting recessed. I stood by the window in the corridor. A few minutes later, True Lin Tin stepped out. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her expression was calm. You really want controlling power? That's the premise. Then the True Family will no longer be the True Family. It already isn't. She looked at me. You've changed completely. Different positions. The board will agree. There's no other path. She said it without emotional fluctuation. The sharp arrogance she once carried had been worn smooth. A few minutes later we returned to the conference room. The head of the True Family spoke. We agree to the controlling stake proposal. Several shareholders nodded. No one objected. The conditions were finalized quickly. Nam Group would inject capital and obtain more than half of the shares. The True Family would retain several seats but no longer hold the final decision-making power. On the signing day, the conference room was very quiet. I signed in the chairperson's position. The head of the True Family signed beside me. True Lim Tin stood to the side without speaking rights. She watched the agreement settle in place, her face expressionless. When the signing ended, I stood up. The post-merger integration will be led by Nam Group's team. Understood. The head of the True family's voice was low. The meeting dispersed. People left one after another. True Lim Tin was the last to remain. Have you ever regretted it? She stared at me for several seconds, as if hoping to confirm it just once. I understand. She said nothing more. When I stepped out of the conference room, the corridor lights were bright. Li Ha sent a message. Quach Diu Quang filed for divorce. I stopped walking. Is it confirmed? I replied. The paperwork has been submitted. I put the phone away. A marriage that had still been publicly maintained just days ago had now reached this point. There was nothing surprising about it. Risk had to be cut off. Marriage had become a burden. That evening, Nam Group convened an internal merger meeting. I sat in the chairperson's seat. All projects under True Group must be reassessed. Cut the loss-making sectors. Retain the core assets. The team took notes quickly. This time I was no longer standing behind True Group. I was standing in front of it. After the meeting ended, Li Ha asked. President Nam, should we discuss the next arrangements with Miss True? No special handling is necessary. Night fell. I returned to the office. The glass wall reflected the lights outside. The True Group sign still hung on the rooftop of the building. But the shareholding structure had already changed. He proposed divorce. She texted. I glanced at the message and didn't reply immediately. A few minutes later another message arrived. So it happened faster than I expected. I replied with one sentence. Read the terms carefully before signing. There was a long silence on the other end. Thank you. I set the phone down. No extra words were needed. She had gone from the central figure to a spectator. I, on the other hand, had never stopped being the one holding control. None of this was because of emotion. It was the result of choices. 1 year later, the True Group sign was still there, but the shareholding structure had completely changed. Nam Group had become the controlling party. The merger was completed. The project lines were reduced to 3. Core assets were retained. Loss-making assets were cleaned out. The personnel structure had been adjusted. The books were clean. I sat in the chairman's office and signed the final annual audit report. The finance director stood beside me. This year True Group achieved positive cash flow for the first time. The profit margin is low, but healthy. Maintain the pace. He left. The secretary walked in. Regarding Quach Diu Quang, the bankruptcy and liquidation procedures have been completed. I didn't stop writing. His personal assets have been frozen. The companies under his name have been dissolved. Within a year he had gone from a rapidly rising figure to complete silence. The process hadn't been long. Capital has no patience for failure. At 3 in the afternoon I received a call from True Lim Tin. Her number hadn't appeared on my phone for a long time. Do you have time to meet? Where? The old place. She meant the cafe we used to visit when we were young. She was already sitting by the window when I arrived. No high heels, no elaborate makeup, just a simple white shirt and shoulder-length hair. She looked up and smiled faintly. Long time no see. I sat down. The server approached. She ordered black coffee. He signed the papers. I heard. More decisive than I expected. For him, it was cutting losses. I used to think marriage was a card, a kind of cost. She said it without emotion. True Group is operating quite well now. She continued. The board of directors speaks highly of you. That's the team's work. You've become steadier. Position determines everything. I've already left management. Now I'm just a normal shareholder. That's fine too. She smiled. Aren't you curious about how I've been living? If you want to talk about it, you can. She lowered her head, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. When the divorce first happened, I couldn't accept it. Later I realized it had been cracked for a long time. Have you ever hated me? Emotion doesn't solve problems. She was silent for a moment. I always thought you were too rational. Do you still think that? Now I think I was too impulsive. The cafe was quiet. Sunlight came through the window and fell across the table. She suddenly asked. If I hadn't taken that step back then, what would we be now? We'll never know. She laughed softly. You still refuse to make hypothetical assumptions. Hypotheticals have no meaning. This past year I've understood something. What? No one has to pay for another person's impulsiveness. She spoke slowly. I didn't respond. At first I thought I could have both emotion and resources at the same time. In the end I lost both. Now I've learned how to read financial reports. You taught me that. I smiled faintly. I didn't teach you. My actions did. She took a sip of coffee. I came today to say I'm sorry. That's unnecessary. I owe you an explanation. It's already in the past. After a few seconds she asked. Are you happy now? I thought for a moment. I'm very clear-headed. She looked at me, her eyes complicated. You really don't hate me at all? Then that's good. Between us there were no arguments and no resentment anymore, only traces left by time. If the company needs it in the future, I'll cooperate. You really don't give any face at all. Business and personal matters are separate. When we stepped out of the cafe, there was no sound of sharp high heels anymore. Her footsteps were light. I stood at the door and watched her get into her car. The car drove away without looking back. That evening I returned to the office. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window was the familiar glass wall. In 1 year the entire landscape had changed. True Group had become a subsidiary under Nam Group. Quach Diu Quang had left the stage. True Lim Tin had retreated from the center to the edge. And I sat in this office without losing anything. A work message arrived. I replied and set the phone down. The night outside the window was deep. My reflection appeared on the glass. Without ripples, without regret. When she chose to leave in the beginning, that was her freedom. When I chose to withdraw capital, that was my right. Every outcome came from the judgments made at the time. No one has to bear the consequences of someone else's impulsiveness. And no one will stand still forever waiting for someone to turn back. I turned off the office lights. The elevator doors slowly closed. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to China Story Tales, and stay tuned for more stories.